Good morning, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf, and I have again got Roz from Scandinavian About the Books.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about Jane Austen's manipulative mothers, and in particular we're going to be ranking Jane Austen's manipulative mothers from sort of least successful / least manipulative to most successful and manipulative.
Yeah. And you're not to read anything into the fact that Tilly's doing this with her mother, okay?
And well, it fits the theme, but Roz is not at all manipulative. She's very honest. Yes,
that's what she thinks.
But
yeah.
you're reading one of the biographies of Jane Austen. You're
I am.
reading Claire Tomalin. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about Jane's own mother. Do we think that she was a manipulator?
Yes, I think not. I think some biographers do suggest that Jane became quite irritated with her mother at times, but then they were very sort of thrown together, in any household, sometimes you're going to irritate each other. Her mother became quite a hypochondriac sort of later in life, and that irritated Jane a lot, because we know when Jane became ill, she kept, she deliberately did not make a fuss, even though she
tried to keep it all under control.
Keep it all under control. But I think manipulative would be the wrong word for her. She didn't set out to arrange her children's marriages. As far as we know, she didn't give Jane a hard time when she turned down Biggs.
Offers, yes.
Yeah, and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
And that kind of reflects on some of the criteria for our manipulative mothers, because we had to set some criteria. We want them to have a plan.
Yes.
So they have to have some kind of ambition to go with their manipulation. And we want them to have, their manipulation has to involve their children to an extent.
Yes.
To an extent, not for all of them, but if they're just manipulative, but it's not about their kids, it's less.
They're not particularly being a manipulative mother.
Well, they're just being a manipulative person.
Yeah.
So we'll start from 10. I'll work our way down to 1.
And who's down at number 10?
Who's down at number 10? Well, it's Lady Bertram.
Lady Bertram.
Because she is...
From Mansfield Park.
Yes. Oh, and I should say spoilers in general.
Spoilers will occur.
Spoilers will occur. Some of these mothers manipulate towards the end of the book. So Lady Bertram, she is manipulative in that she makes things revolve around her.
Yes, I'd say she's a highly manipulative person in that sort of poor little me.
Yeah, so I can't be on my own in the evening.
No, you've got to do this for me.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have a grand plan.
Yeah, there's no plan involved, and it's not really related to her children. It's just related to her own personal comfort.
Her needs.
So she ranks pretty.
So hence, despite being a manipulative person, she's at the bottom for us. Number 9 is almost a surprise.
Yes.
To kind of get into this list at all, but I think it is fair.
Yeah.
Number 9 is Mrs. Morland.
From Northanger Abbey.
Catherine's mother.
Yes, and although it says at the start that her mother is a woman of good plain sense, and in general there is not really an implication that she is manipulating, we don't know what's gone on in the background before the start of the novel for Mrs. Morland to build that relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Allen to get them to take Catherine to Bath. So we've just got a little subtle theory that there might be.
Yes, because what was Bath known for at that time?
Marriage market.
It was a marriage market. So saying, oh yes,
Catherine would love to go to Bath
with you. You have to wonder, but it's implicit, not explicit. Yeah. So,
and on the other hand, she doesn't it doesn't even seem to occur to her that her daughter might have fallen in love while she was in Bath and staying with handsome young men. So it's a bit questionable.
Yeah. So it could really just be that she wants Catherine to have a good time and see a bit of the world.
Yeah. So next one on the list, again, this is low ranking manipulations.
Low ranking.
Back to Mansfield Park
and Mrs. Price. Fanny's mother.
So Fanny's mother, it's not really manipulation, really, is it?
It's more desperation.
Yeah, and it's quite honest. She says, a large and still increasing family, a husband disabled from active service but not the less equal to company and good liquor, and a very small income to supply their wants made her eager to regain the friends she had so carelessly sacrificed. And she addressed Lady Bertram in a letter which spoke so much contrition and despondence, such a superfluity of children, and such a want of almost everything else, as could not but dispose them all to a reconciliation. So she manages to resolve the breach in her family that was caused by her marriage, and she does that in the interest of her children.
Yes.
But she doesn't really have a master plan.
Well, yeah, she sort of manipulates her relatives to solve a problem. Yeah. But, it's a sort of, as I say, understandable because she's just so desperate.
Yeah, it's a response to the situation.
Yeah, as problem solving. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and
rather than scheming.
It's not scheming. Yeah, she's not asking to send a daughter away to thinking, oh, she'll get married well, because she doesn't actually ask for that. She just asks for help.
It's like somebody feed and house one of my children, please.
She never asks for that. She only asks for help getting her sons into professions.
True. Yeah.
So she ranks pretty low.
Yes.
Getting a little bit higher up the list then.
Number 7.
Mary Musgrove.
Yeah.
Persuasion.
Minor character, but definitely a manipulative woman.
Yeah, and it's kind of like she's got young children, so you get the feeling she's at the start of her manipulative career.
We should remind people who Mary Musgrove is, because she's not such a major
so she's
character.
Anne Elliot's married sister, and she's got a few young kids.
Yeah.
And she's a bit like Lady Bertram in that she's not, although she uses her kids and says, with a mother's feelings and all of this stuff, she's using her children to promote her own comfort rather than as part of a master plan.
Yeah, and she sort of, but she also says she uses Anne to look after her children. She does sort of. She
arranges things.
She arranges things around herself and for her own comfort, and uses the fact that she's a mother more explicitly to that end than say, you'd never see Mrs. Gardiner in Pride and Prejudice trying that on, would you?
And she does, like, she knows who she can work on, and she does know that she can work on Anne, and so she brings Anne to her to sort of help her out with things.
Yeah.
So that's why she gets to 7th place.
Yes. Now we're moving up the tree of manipulativeness now, aren't we? We're getting into stronger territory with our number 6, Lady Catherine Deberg.
And I'd almost rate her lower because she doesn't succeed in her number 1 priority of manipulation.
She fails miserably.
In terms of getting her daughter married to the person that she wants her to be married to. But she is clearly a consummate manipulator of everyone around her.
And that's why, for the reader, it's so satisfying that Elizabeth sort of fends her off, because you can see that she's so very much accustomed to manipulating people successfully, and then she fails with Darcy and Elizabeth.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that is set up throughout Austen's works, is that the people with strength of character are able to resist this the manipulations around them.
Yes, or the forces of society.
Yeah. And I will say one of the other themes with manipulation is that female manipulators tend to be better at manipulating men than women, and Elizabeth herself is worried about this. So she says, from what she had said of her resolution to prevent their marriage, from what Lady Catherine had said, it occurred to Elizabeth that she must meditate an application to her nephew, and how he might take a similar representation of the evils attached to a connection with her she dared not pronounce. So she thinks Lady Catherine's going to have more success manipulating Darcy than she did
than she had with me. Yes.
Obviously, that turns out not to be true, for the happiness of all concerned, apart from Lady Catherine.
But she'll live. Yeah. So, we're into our top 5.
Getting better.
They're getting stronger candidates for the manipulative title.
And we've got in Sense and Sensibility, Mrs. Ferris. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Ferris is Edward Ferrers' mother.
Yeah.
And she wants him to be a successful young man in society. And she also wants him to marry Miss Morton.
Yes.
And she's successful in that for many years of his life, she overshadows his career and stops him from doing things that he actually wants to do.
Yeah.
But she's unsuccessful in her ultimate aims because she's out-manipulated by Miss Lucy Steele.
Yes.
I will just say the way that she does her manipulation, because she has money, like Lady Catherine, she has a bit more power than some of the other manipulators, and even some of the more successful manipulators.
Yes.
So she tries to make him put an end to his engagement, by trying to control him financially. So duty, affection, everything was disregarded. His mother explained to him her liberal design in case of his marrying Miss Morton, told him that she would settle on him the Norfolk estate, which, clear of land tax, brings in a good £1,000 a year, offered even when matters grew desperate to make it £1,200, and in opposition to this, if he still persisted in this low connection, represented to him the certain penury that must attend the match. So she tries to work on him through financial motives, but obviously Edward, being honest and upstanding, is able to resist.
Yes. So she's the sort of domineering woman who uses the tools in her power, but on that occasion fails. Because the other mother in Sense and Sensibility that we haven't included in our list at all is Mrs. Ashwood. Yeah.
Yes.
Because she's just such a sweetie.
Yeah, and she doesn't manipulate really. The one slightly manipulative thing she does is she makes them stay in London when they want to come home.
She does.
But that's not really in the interest of getting them married or as part of a grand plan. That's just because she thinks Marianne will actually recover better if she's not at home.
Yes, her intentions are always very kindly.
Yes.
So no Mrs. Dashwood in this list. Yeah. Number 4.
Yeah, getting into the real manipulators, actually. Getting into the people who really try to control things around them. And I think, I'd almost rate her higher, but it's very hard. When it gets to the top few, it's very, very hard.
Yes.
And that is Lady Susan herself.
At number 4.
Number 4. How is she so low down the list?
Yeah, because she's so manipulative and clever and very much has a plan.
And of all of the mothers that we're talking about, she's the one that's probably the most proud of her manipulation. She really sees
shameless.
As key to her character.
Yeah.
And she talks about sort of manipulating people to try and get her daughter married, and she says, if the world knew my motives, they would exonerate me for manipulating to try and get my daughter married. Well, she thinks, this is obviously the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So why is she only number 4?
Why? Yes.
Well, now I can't, because she doesn't succeed.
She fails.
She does fail.
She does fail.
And she does end up advantageously married herself, with her daughter advantageously married,
but not
to the
through
people
her
that she was
manipulation.
And it's a classic example of a manipulative mother who is unable to work on the women around her. She's very good at controlling the men, but the women resist her, and they are able to sort of undermine her in the end.
Yes. And you have the feeling that Austen as an author she loves her character, Lady Susan, but she doesn't quite want her to entirely succeed because it's kind of not okay for a really bad character to
because in terms of the moralities of the time, she had to have her comeuppance a little bit.
So hence only a number 4 because she's slightly thwarted.
Yes.
Number 3. Now, I would almost have been tempted to put her higher up, but
yes, I was going to put her
success.
She's
Can you guess who we're thinking about?
She's
the most successful, even though she's consistently described as a silly woman.
Yes, and I think that's one of her successes, is she's always underestimated.
Yes. Who are we talking about? Show us the book.
Pride and Prejudice. It's Mrs. Bennett.
Mrs. Bennett.
And you might be thinking, Mrs. Bennett's just silly. She's not manipulative. But she says at the start that she wants Mr. Bingley to marry one of her daughters, and Mr. Bingley marries one of her daughters. She says if somebody marries Mr. Bingley, her daughters will be thrown into the path of other rich men. Well, that's what happens to Catherine at the end. She's going to stay at Pemberley. She's going to stay with the Bingleys. She's going to probably have a good...
Yes, Kitty's future is,
pretty much secured through that.
Yes.
She wants to get as many daughters married as possible. Well, in the space of about a year, she gets 3 daughters married.
Yeah.
Obviously, Lydia's marriage we have our doubts about, but she.
But she's quite happy about it because she also says that she'd be perfectly happy for her one of her daughters to be married to an officer, handsome young officer, and that is what happens
in a roundabout way. Yes. And, one of the classic examples of her manipulating is when she persuades Jane to go to dinner at Netherfield on horseback just in case it rains. And obviously she can't claim credit for the rain, but she can claim credit for the idea.
She can, in a sense, claim credit for the rain because what she observes that it looks like rain. The weather looks threatening. Yeah. And, if it had been a beautifully gorgeous, warm, sunny day, it wouldn't have mattered. She'd have let her go in the carriage because... Yes.
And obviously Jane gets ill, and when Mrs. Bennett goes to visit Jane, she says, had she found Jane in any apparent danger, Mrs. Bennett would have been very miserable. But being satisfied on seeing that her illness was not alarming, she had no wish of recovering her immediately, as her restoration to health would probably remove her from Netherfield. She says to the Bingleys, "Oh, indeed I have, sir," was her answer. "She's a great deal too ill to be moved. Mr. Jones," the apothecary, "says we must not think of moving her. We must trespass a little longer on your kindness." And this phase of time where Jane and Elizabeth are at Netherfield is absolutely crucial for the relationships that they develop in this book.
And it's all happens because of
Mrs.
Bennett being a little bit more wily than her silly reputation might.
And there's the reason why she's probably my favourite manipulative mother is because she does have the best interests of her children very much at heart. And Lady Susan, although she needs her daughter to be married because she is in financial difficulty, she doesn't care that her daughter doesn't like Sir James Martin.
Yeah.
Whereas Mrs. Bennett, when she hears that Mr. Darcy has been rude to Elizabeth, rather than saying, well, he's got £10,000 a year, so you better still try and catch him, she says, well, nobody wants him, he's just proud.
Yeah. Even though she's quite cross with her about turning down Mr. Collins, but then that would have just solved so much
so many problems
for the whole family when the father died. So you can, it's like her motives are not, there's nothing evil in her motives.
Yeah.
It's all about how do we manage this situation in a way that her supposedly clever husband doesn't seem to see, completely failed to do.
And she does manipulate that husband to go to call on Mr. Bingley, for instance. And the reason why she can't be higher on this list, much as we love her, is that she doesn't succeed in getting Elizabeth to marry Mr. Collins, and she doesn't succeed in getting Mr. Bennett to take them all to Brighton. So there's two quite noticeable failures.
Yeah, absolutely.
So she couldn't be at top.
No, she couldn't. And you want your top ones to be clever in a way. Yeah.
And moving on to a very clever mother, and I think most of you will have forgotten that she's a mother. Yeah. That's how clever and manipulative she is. If I tell you she's from Persuasion, you have a couple of minutes to guess. It is
Mrs. Clay.
So Mrs. Clay comes back to Kellynch Hall with, it says somewhere, I didn't tab it, like a few children in tow, having been widowed after an unsuccessful marriage, and immediately sets about to distance herself from these children and make herself seem like a promising young woman.
Yes, as if she's a lovely, available, unencumbered young woman. That someone would just love to marry and make mistress of Kellynch Hall.
She ingratiates herself into the family. She gets transported from presumably not such a great situation to a comfortable house in Bath, where she gets to enjoy society.
Yeah. Where are the children? We don't know.
We presume that her own parents are looking after them. And I would say the reason that I think that she's got a plan is because she's obviously planning to be Mistress of Kellynch.
Yes, which will secure a future for those children.
Exactly.
But she just knows that in order to do that, she has to have them out of the way and present herself as...
forget that she is.
Yes, and she does make people forget that,
And then at the end of the book, she still has her successes because she had abilities, however, as well as affections. It is now a doubtful point whether his cunning, as in Sir Walter Elliot's, Sir William Elliot's even, whether his cunning or hers may finally carry the day, whether after preventing her from being the wife of Sir Walter, he may not be wheedled and caressed into at last making her the wife of Sir William. And I think that's fairly likely.
It's a strong clue.
What we've seen of Mrs. Clay's abilities.
Yeah, she's going to win through. Yeah.
And she is, in a way, she's a very kind of Lady Susan character, but because we're not inside her head, we don't see the tricks that she's playing.
The machinations she's playing. Yes, and we don't find her that attractive, but it's very obvious that other people in the book
do.
Men, and to an extent women.
Yes, because that's one of the reasons she's so successful, is she's able to manipulate Elizabeth as well.
Yeah. Who's our number one? Have you guessed?
The most successful and the most vicious as well, I think.
Yes, the one that we love to hate. Yeah.
Oh, love to hate so much.
Yes.
Back to Sense and Sensibility. It's Mrs. Fanny Dashwood. She's just so evil.
Evil.
And so successful in her ultimate aims.
Yes, and people not recognising how horrible she is.
Yeah, and her husband is obviously completely wrapped around her finger. So Mrs. Fanny Dashwood, she's the the sister-in-law to the Dashwood sisters. She's
Eleanor
married to
and
their
Marianne.
half-brother who has inherited
Their
all of the money.
Older half-brother who's and had, you know, promised that he would look after his father's second wife, widow, and his half-sisters.
And he originally plans to give them £1,000 apiece, which would make a huge difference both to their marriage prospects, but also to their day-to-day comfort in general life. And there's this great scene, which I can't read all of because it goes on for like 4 pages, where they're discussing this together, and without just saying, no, I don't think you should give them anything.
I don't want you because I want it all.
Yes. She says, Mrs. John Dashwood did not at all approve of what her husband intended to do for his sisters. To take £3,000 from the fortune of their dear little boy would be impoverishing him to the most dreadful degree. And she works through it bit by bit of saying, oh, you know, well, £3,000 is quite a lot. Oh, well, you know, I'm not sure they really need it. I'm not sure that's what your father kind of meant for you to do for them.
Yeah.
And it comes to such a point that her arguments were irresistible. It gave to his intentions whatever of decision was wanting before, and he finally resolved that it would be absolutely unnecessary, if not highly indecorous, to do more for the widow and children of his father than such kind neighbourly acts, as his own wife pointed out, which is like moving their furniture when they move house, which in the end he's not able to do, or being nice to them when they come to town, which in the end, again, they don't do. So, yeah.
She successfully, in order to preserve the full inheritance for her son and her children, completely overturns his intentions.
And she, in common with a lot of our manipulative mothers, she has very strong financial motivations and kind of a streak of, what do you call it, you know, greed or
avariciousness.
Avariciousness, that's a good word.
Yes, yeah.
So there we go. Have we missed any manipulative mothers, do you think?
Do you disagree with our order?
Yeah. Would you quarrel with where we put them?
Yeah.
We would love to hear what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching.